What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Collective Comics and the Lights Comics Action Podcast. We're diving into episode number 27 here today. Man, we're getting in deep to these episodes.
We're officially far enough into our episode list that we screwed up last week.
Last week was 20. Yep, and I said it multiple times too, and I feel like the way I delivered it was with pure confidence.
Oh, if you're wrong, at least be wrong with confidence, you know?
Yeah, 100%, man. You know,
but episode 27 is a dope one. We got a special one for y'all.
Man, this one's really cool. We did our first, I guess you could say, FaceTime interview.
Right, yeah. We had Zach on an episode, but this is the first one where we got somebody and we got on the computer and we got to know some people.
Right. We actually had two somebodies, very special guests that we had on the podcast this week. We had director Adam Schomer, as well as Darren Watts, the owner of what is coming to be known as the Fantastic Collection, and they're working on a documentary called Selling Superman. And man, that trailer looks really cool. If you guys want to see those trailers and everything else for it, you can head over to sellingsuperman.com. That's where you're going to see all the latest news, details, and even investment opportunities to get in on this document.
Yeah, there's a documentary about Darren and his father's collection, and this conversation got way deeper than I had originally expected it would going into it, but I'm so happy with the conversation that we had. You know what I mean? Like, it was so much. I have so much more respect for them and this documentary, knowing the story, and it's so cool to me. You know, like I went from like, I'll see this documentary when it comes out to like, I want to see the documentary tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
100%. We had a great conversation with some very great people. We were very grateful for them hopping on the podcast and telling us all about their documentary and giving us some behind-the-scenes information.
Dope. Let's get into it.
How are you guys doing today?
Pretty well.
Fantastic. Thanks for having us on. Yeah.
Very excited. There's you guys have the website sellingsuperman.com, which has some more of like press and other things that you guys have been going into. That's actually how I found you guys was through some of the press releases on Instagram and
yeah, and there's a sizzle there on the website too. People can see like an extended trailer that we wanted to put out, you know, even while we're in production here. We're still filming. It's an ongoing story, so it's fun to start to get the word out while things are happening, because it's like the film affects real life, as Darren knows, you know.
Yeah, definitely. That's one thing I was going to ask, is if you guys were done filming, if it's wrapped up, or anything like that.
No, we're still in production. There's probably 20% more to go, 15-20% more to go. The story's always unfolding, but we've covered a lot so far. I started. Darren can tell you how long the journey's been happening, obviously his whole life, but I started filming November of 21 is when I first went out there, and we looked at Darren's old house before it sold, so we got to see where the comics were stored, and in a very cinema verite way, like be with Darren and his mom and his brother in that old house before it went. So that was cool, and then we ramped up after that, so it's been at least a good year of shooting on and off. Yeah.
Wow, so there's going to be a lot to cover in this story.
Yeah.
Before we get too far into it, can you guys just explain to anybody who doesn't know exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about filming and the documentary and selling Superman, and what that is exactly?
Sure. You Darren, you want to take it or you want me to?
Go ahead.
All right, so I mean, look, my friend Darren, who we went to high school together, but he called me up and said, hey, there's this 40-year secret that we didn't talk about, people didn't know about. My dad collected comics in an obsessive way, incredible way, partly caused by his Asperger's, which again, wasn't really talked about. And it left him with 300,000 comics and a Superman #1 graded at a 7.0. It wasn't graded at the time, but now is. And we started talking, and we thought it'd be a great idea to follow that journey. And to really, as I got to know Darren and his family more, you know people a bit in high school, but how often do you get to sit down with their mom and talk with their mom about the relationship with the father? And it's really a fascinating family portrait. It's not an easy story by any means, and I think it's an emotional father-son story, a story of mental health, and I think in the end a real powerful story of finding out what we give meaning to and our power to give meaning to things. And Darren can talk more about the specifics of it, but that's what we're going for in the film. And it's fun. Comic books are fun too. As much as it's an emotional story, this is a great genre, and you guys must have a blast being around superheroes all day.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think the big thing that I was really intrigued with as far as the film. I'm not chasing any fame, I'm not chasing any notoriety. In fact, I'm really uncomfortable with it. Seeing articles and things. We've been on the front page of our local newspaper, and I was horrified, and that's the truth. I mean, yes, I agreed to do the the spread with them and whatnot, but I figured it'd be buried in some back corner of the it's not like front page news, right? But hey, people are really taking to it, and they're saying, wow, this is very interesting, and it's incredibly humbling. So. I never thought it'd be like this. To be honest with you, there's times I regret doing it at all. There's times that I'm really delighted and, having opportunities to meet with cool people. I just want to be understood correctly, and I think that's the big thing that I hope the film's going to really help with, is dispel some, maybe some assumptions and just really give gravity to the impact that something like this can have on you growing up and your family. And that's great that there's a tremendous amount of value to it now monetarily, but really that's not what the story's about, and that's real important to note.
I think that's
I found myself getting really attached to your guys' story, like watching the trailers and trying to find out as much about the documentary as I can, that I was finding myself more attached to you guys and your family than I was the comics. The comics kind of brought me there and got me there, and then I was like, this is a crazy story, from all different angles, all the emotion. I'm sure it covers every kind of emotion.
Yeah, and that's something that's important that we're trying to get the word out, is that, that I've been very I guess you could use the word proud or whatever, to be in the position of life that I am, independently of having anything to do with this. This wasn't something I asked for. This isn't something that I was intending on having. This isn't something I looked forward to having. It's not something I planned my life around having. I have multiple businesses that I put my heart and soul into. They're all ground up, and I have a lot of great people that work with me or for me. But the fact is that this isn't about a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow kind of scenario here. That's not what this is about. This is in addition to anything I've ever built independently, and while there's a tremendous amount of value, again, it's not defining me. It's never defined me. And so, that's just something really important we're trying to make sure this is touched on, because, when you have that mindset where this is not technically life-changing money and life-changing, monetary value, well, then you can really do what you want with it. And that includes working with who you want, when you want, making sure you get it to people that really appreciate this stuff instead of feeling desperate, like you just have to dump it. We can take our time, work with people we think really value it and aren't just trying to scalp us, right? You know what I mean? So you hear so many of those stories where people are forced to, or they're tricked, or you know what I mean? They don't have the means themselves to even contain a collection like this, let alone grade it. So we're very fortunate to be able to take our time, do it right how we want, and not let it define it. We're working with several charities, so that, it's just a good way to bring this out in a way that's totally opposite from how it was when I was raised. This was all kept in the dark, hidden, not talked about, completely secluded. And here we are now. Look at, we've never met before, and here we're talking about this openly, and, it'll go to whoever your audience is. I mean, that couldn't be further from what my father was doing with this collection. So it feels really good to turn, as Adam always says, change the narrative of what these things do. They're the same books, but they did, cause this pain before, and now they're able to come out and have this positive impact. It's very interesting.
Yes, very total opposite sides of the spectrum, as far as, like you said, them being very valuable, and I think you were stating a little bit before that that's what most people will try to do. And have you had any occurrences where people were, oh, you have this, let me see, oh no, it's not what it seems, almost trying to scalp you?
Oh gosh, yes, of course. I mean, I have people, and listen, I don't mind. I try to stay again very feet on the ground. I appreciate that people have a collection they're trying to fill, and that they see an opportunity like this, like, oh, look at this guy. Maybe this is a source that I can go to fill some of my gaps and whatnot. Listen, I appreciate that. There's nothing anyone doing wrong about that, but what needs to be realized is that I'm getting attacked from all different angles all the time, like and it's always about do you have, it's always coming at me as of wanting something, right? And, again, it's not like, I've even had people ask, like, literally if I'd almost give stuff away because there's so much there. And, I don't know if there's some entitlement. You're going to have those one-off people. Most people, just want to know if you have certain books. And the problem is, that we have right now is nothing's organized. Okay, so how my father collected, and just imagine 300,000 plus comics, and then remember sports cards, and then remember Star Wars toys, and then remember other collectibles, and we're still sorting through them. He has just as many sports cards as he does comics.
Yeah, and so it wasn't just comics.
No.
Wow.
This man, and see that's where when people try to give credit, and again, I'm not about taking credit away from my father. That it's very important. Is that a lot of the reaction is that we really hated on him when he was alive, and thought he was crazy for doing what he did, but now again that there's dollar signs that we think it's great. That is not the case. I still think it's stupid. Right. I still think this is insane. Okay, the way that he did it, how he did it, was not conducive. I mean, listen, anybody can pick up a whole bunch of stuff, put it in a box, and leave it for 50 years. Right. Anybody. There's no genius to that. Okay, and here's the thing. He didn't do it with just the keys. No, we have everything. We have a ton of garbage. When I say garbage, I mean stuff that has no monetary value. I mean, it just doesn't worth anything to anybody. No one wants it. You know what I mean? Whether it's just whatever. And, we have incredibly low-grade stuff, and then we have some of the highest-grade stuff that's on the census. I mean, that's what's amazing is we have so many titles that are like top in the census because of the way it was preserved and stored and not touched. And then we have runs or not just runs, but multiple copies of certain keys that he just spec'd on and said, oh, okay, I'll buy 200 copies of Ghost Rider 1. I'll buy 200 copies of Strange Tales 169. I'll buy 200 copies. Yes, those are accurate numbers. Okay, I'll buy 200 copies of Star Wars 1 or whatever. 150. I don't even know. Okay, but the thing is, yes, I'll do that, and on and on and on and on and on. And so the thing is, there was some of that, but it's not about me thinking that he was a genius collector. People are like, oh my God, the forethought. No, he was just a hoarder, and comics and collectibles and cards were his thing, and he just bought whatever. So guess what? If you buy everything, you're going to luck out sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And that's just what it is. And so, but it was at the sacrifice of doing a lot of other things with the family, whether it would be vacations, experiences, other things. So was it genius in that way? Well, he never got to realize it or capture it. I certainly didn't ask for it or was relying on it. I have a younger brother, and he needs help with economic decisions, things like that. We're very sensitive to the way we talk about it, but he's not fully independent, if that makes sense, if that's a good way to say it, okay? So the fact is that he needs help in a lot of different ways. So he's not equipped to deal with this at all. Now, again, I make sure he's treated fairly and all his needs are obviously always met, always. But my father dumped this on me alone, and he left no instruction. He had no will. They weren't organized. There was no list. There was nothing graded. Nothing. So and I begged him for years, decades, literally, hey, let's do this as a family. Let's enjoy this as a family. So anyone is sitting there thinking like, oh, this guy's just cashing out and, hated on his dad while he was alive, and now, he's got these millions and millions and millions of dollars of comics, they're wrong. They're wrong. That's not what I wanted. That's not what I was hoping for. And I wanted to do this as a business with my father beforehand, or just have him do it on his own and facilitate and help him. But he could never let go. He could never let go of his stuff.
He was really sentimental towards keeping those kind of things. I find myself doing those kind of things as a collector as well. And now when you're saying he bought 200 or 300 copies, I buy 3 or 4 copies. And some people are like, you buy 3 or 4 copies of the same book, why? So 3 or 4, that's a lot. And
But it's not, though. Think about it real quick. Okay, I mean, Warren Buffett 101, it's just as an investment, okay? When it's raining gold, you put out bathtubs, not buckets. So if you think something's going to hit, you're just making a good investment by doing what you're doing. Okay, he just did it to multiple more copies than that. But remember, he was paying cover for this.
Yeah.
100 copies at 30 cents. You guys got $30.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Are you hearing what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Big deal.
Definitely. So it wasn't,
That's a dinner, dude. That's a nice dinner.
Oh yeah.
So he spent $30. He spent a nice dinner on 100 copies of Ghost Rider 1.
Wow.
Yippee.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a,
But he
it's
did.
a little bit
Okay,
different.
fine. You see? Yeah, exactly
Yeah.
right. It was a lot different then, right? And then he also he was also very, very close to the comic store owner of the store that he frequented since the 70s. And he became very close with that owner. So was there, hey, order me an extra case of this title coming out? You know, I do know on our giant size, we have 13 giant size X-Men's. I think 8 of them are 9/8. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, here's the thing. He wanted more. We talked to, and Adam remembers, we talked to one of the employees at the store that he bought from. We tracked him down, and it was a great conversation. And he told a story about how my father wanted literally the case of giant size that they kind of found when they were moving locations. And they said, no, you can't have all of them. You know what I mean? He said, oh, okay. Well, and they ended up with 13. Well, when they go from the case to board and bagged to his car to a box at home, that's it. And I mean, I want to touch on another thing. You talk about like your collection, you may be sentimental, you don't want to lose touch with it. Let me ask you this. I see some stuff in the background, even in your stuff. I don't know what that is, but you have them out. You display them? Do you look at them? Do you enjoy them? Do you share them with your friends?
I do. That was
He
one
did
thing
none
that
of
I
that.
also wanted to touch on.
He did none of that. So the answer is, when you talk about sentimental or whatever, I think he just liked the idea that he had them. They were under sheets. They were in boxes in the dark. They were in closed up rooms. We had 2 rooms upstairs in my childhood home that needed work done to the floor because there were so many boxes that it was bowing the floor. So he had a handyman come in, and of course, one of the first things the guy wanted to do is look in the room. Like, what am I doing? He wouldn't let him in the room. He's like, no, you can do everything from underneath. The guy's like, no, I kind of need to see what's in the room and understand, like, you have 2 grand pianos in there, or what do you got in there, And he never let him in the room. He never did anything about it. That was the lever of the neurosis. We weren't allowed in those rooms. We weren't allowed to take friends in those rooms. So you tell me what kind of stigma that would give to me as a kid. We're talking kid, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, all the way up. Do you think I loved comics? You think
Probably not, to be honest.
You're right. I resented him. And I don't care if he had a Batman or Superman. I didn't even know what those were. I mean, we had never seen them. And were they tattered? Were they in pieces? Or were they the second nicest copy in the world like ours was at the time? No clue.
As you're talking about that resentment, Darren, I think it's important to remind people that, Darren's mom, when she divorced Dale, didn't want anything to do with the comics. The lawyer said, you can have whatever they're worth, we don't know, but you can have half that. She said, I want nothing to do with that.
Correct.
And I think that's a real heroic thing to say, no, that's the past, and I don't want anything to do with it. I want to move on and create a new life. And I really love that about your mom. I mean, like I said, just getting to know someone's mom when we're adults is kind of a unique thing as a friend, and she's a hero.
My mother is a hero, and my mother, thank God for her, because she was a pillar to me throughout this and reminding me that the treatment that we were experiencing was not normal. And it was a beacon for me, because without her, I wouldn't have known what was normal. How do you know what's your normal? You're raised with it your whole life, right? That is your normal. You're in the forest, you're surrounded by the trees. You don't know. And so the thing is that she would constantly remind me, Darren, honey, people don't do this. This is normal. You go to a friend's house and this, they don't hoard like that or whatever. But the answer is that she would talk about the passive aggressiveness as well. And he drove her crazy. And she finally did divorce him, and a large part of it was because of his consuming, hoarding nature, that his priorities were so messed up. But what's so important that Adam says is she's not a materialistic person, wasn't then, isn't now. She had no benefit from the comics. I'll give her anything she wants, but I would have done that anyways. I have my own means. Okay, my mother is not lacking, but she is in no way lives lavishly. In fact, she prides herself on simplicity. And so she benefited nothing from the financial gain of these comics, nor now or then. So, again, you'll have people that misunderstand and look at like the CBS article, newscast and be like, oh, here she is proud now. She knows how much they're worth. That's a zero factor in anything. What she's proud of is that we are finally embracing them as a potential positive and that we are not hiding them. And I'm not doing the same thing to my stepkids that was done to me. And creating this family secrecy and so on. So that's just a huge point. And thank you for reminding that, Adam, because it's the truth. Yeah. And again, that's great. These things are worth a lot of money. He didn't even know. He didn't even know.
Yeah, that's another thing, because you were saying he's buying them at cover price when these books came out, so it's not like somebody went and spent $10,000 on one book and knew kind of that it was going to be eventually worth even more than that.
Well, he did have the concept. He knew he was investing, okay? Mm-hmm. But he didn't know what. Like when I'd ask him, first of all, there's a second video. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if you're aware of our custom label that we have with CGC. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, and if you watch that second video, okay, on the website, so on sellingsuperman.com, the top video is the trailer and the sizzle, yep. And then underneath it is an explanation of that label. And if you haven't watched it, please do. You'll find it fascinating being in the comic world. It's like 10 minutes long, and it's me meeting with Matt Nelson at CGC. It's me meeting with the head people at Heritage about that. Very emotional journey of going through and coming up with the imagery for the label. And why I mention that is because one of the scenes in the label was a UFO beaming his stuff up into space from a bottomless pit. And it may look completely random, like what the heck is this about? Well, again, that little video explains it, and then we explain it in other places, like the provenance certificate that we give out with every sold graded book. It has the explanation on there as well now. But the point is that he literally, when asked, I said, well, what are you going to do with this stuff? Well, I figure I'm just going to, beam up to space and float around with it. Now, he was kidding, but he never went further than that. Does that make sense? So he'd give this like weird, deflective answer, but never qualify it. And never said, but what I really mean is that I want you to do this, or this is how you should handle it, or this is my wishes with it, or whatever. Give it all to starving children. Okay, Dad, whatever you say. Put in your will. He didn't have a will. He was an attorney. He was a business attorney. I'd call up some of his best friends, his closest friends after his passing, and let them know the news. And when they'd ask how I was and everything and so on, and I'd say, well, just sorting through a lot of his stuff is a challenge. I said he didn't have a will. And they'd all be like, he didn't have a will, he did my will. How could he not have a will for himself? So again, this is the kind of things that we deal with that people don't get to see. They just get to see like, oh, spoiled rich kid inherits a bunch of books, lucky him, oh my God, and his daddy didn't tell him he loved him enough. Screw him. I even had literally one guy say to me in a direct message, no one feels sorry for the rich guy. Well, I was rich before the comics, and I'm not bragging on that. I'm just trying to say I've done my own stuff. I don't know what I consider rich. I consider myself that I was very well before the comics. It had nothing to do with it. And again, when you have that kind of attitude, that's just hurtful and misunderstood. So anyway, I know Adam will do a phenomenal job of painting the whole portrait of what this is. And again, this isn't about comic books. You're absolutely right. That's the vehicle for delivering this story.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I actually wanted to ask Adam, as somebody on the outside of the family looking in, like Darren barely knew this was in his house, let alone you, a friend from high school, knowing this is in the house. You know what I mean? And I don't know if you're in the comic world at all, but it's so easy for comic heads to glorify what this is. But as somebody directing something that might not get the whole story out there, how does this feel? Like you're watching this roller coaster in front of you, just a family going through this as a director, especially. How are you perceiving this, and how is your head through all this?
Yeah, it's amazing. The family portrait is amazing as it unravels because Darren and I played soccer together. I was a couple years older, so I had met his dad and mom, or had seen him after a game and all that, but you don't know much. I'm sure Darren was aware of the comics, because you see the sheets covering boxes of comics in your home. Maybe not aware of what's actually in it, even more mysterious, right? He's shaking his head like, yeah, he didn't know what was in it. And his buddy Brian, who loved comics, I'm sure wanted to know what was in it so bad. But no, I was not a comic lover growing up. I played soccer, and that was as far as it went. And I read Lord of the Rings. So I'm always been passionate about fantasy and story, which is great. So I come at it from an angle that's not a comic lover that gets to look at this underbelly of an industry and expose it for the greater audience in the documentary. Like, oh, this is how things work here. And what I've been really amazed by was the passion and the sincerity and the authenticity in the business. I shouldn't even say the business, but in the people that love comics and why they love them. And we bring that out in the film. We will bring it out. How many people where heroes have touched them in a certain way. The comics have been a saving grace for them. One of the artists that did the label for Darren, Iron Man was really important to him because he was bullied as a kid and he always wanted to be in this protective place, and the comic was that for him to escape bullying. So I've been surprised by a lot of stories like that just in terms of comics in general. I was blown away by the value part, the fact that a book could be $4 million or $3 million, and it set me into that question of why do we give such value to things? Where is our meaning placed? Why are superheroes so important? These are the questions that were driving me as a filmmaker to say, let's look at this stuff. And Darren's story is a great way to look at it all, especially with the family history and what we learn to put value on, from our parents and from our society and from the stories, and then how we can eventually, start to choose that in our life, what we want to value, what we think is important. Take the good things from our parents and our society, but change our society for the better, or our own lives for the better. That's what really motivates me, and it's amazing. Like, I got to meet Darren's aunt, who's down in Florida. This is Dale's sister who collects dolls, and is a Disney fanatic. And you start to see the story, come together, and the family portrait come together, and to know about, Darren's mom's family and father and why she might have brought in someone like Dale as a love of her life. These things are interesting, I think, and make it, like you guys are saying, more than just about the comics. The comics is that Trojan horse that's interesting, that keeps us involved, and frankly keeps us laughing a lot too, because Darren and Brian have a good time. And I see behind you got that Batman poster. Brian's a Batman lover and Darren's a Superman lover, and we have this great battle going throughout the whole film about which is better, and we bring everyone in on it and ask everybody what they would. Some people would sell Superman, the Superman one, because they just don't. They like Batman, and some people would sell Batman because they like Superman. So we have a good time with it. I'm learning every day, which is fun, and meeting cool people like yourself that just have been really, into comics their whole life. It's fun to see anybody passionate about something, I think.
Oh yeah, and one of my favorite things about even acquiring a new collection or going and getting some new books and stuff like that is sometimes the stories kind of come to you, with what those books have been through, but a lot of times they end up getting lost. And I think one of the coolest things about any book in your collection is that it has a story, and with this documentary, it's gonna continue to go through it.
True.
And no matter who owns that book is gonna understand. It's way more than the ink that is on a couple of pages of paper.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a cool thing.
Well, we hope that's the case. And to follow up on Adam's value, I've been a part of should I say, relativity as far as value, right? I mean, again, so we just sold our Batman one, right, in an 8.0, and I think you saw that on Heritage, okay? So that book, someone paid, with buyer's premium and all that kind of stuff, that ended up being, someone paid $1.1 something million for that book, okay? And you think about that, you're like, like Adam says, how could someone possibly pay that much for that? And the fact is that I'm very used to the concept of that being relative. Who bought it? What percentage of their net worth did they spend on that? And is that like, a normal American buying a comic book for $500? What's the relativity to that to them? And I find that very interesting, okay? Because the fact is everyone fixates on that dollar figure, which, listen, by any standard, that's a tremendous amount of money for for that book. But really, when you think about it, is it? Because it's a piece of history, a piece of art, and it's very, very, very finite. That is in the top 10 copies, top 8 copies of that book on the planet. And the likelihood of that many more being found in that grade, are diminishing daily. Like you said, things get lost. Things get thrown out. The kid goes to college and mom throws out the comics. I mean, how many times have you heard that story, right? And so the fact of the matter is that's what makes this stuff really valuable. There's a lot of times I turn around and be like, God, that's undervalued. Such a major staple character, a worldwide, like human uniting character. This isn't like, whose government's better, whose religion's better. No, this is a worldwide human character that people relate to, whether it's Superman, Batman. I mean, you can show that Superman symbol in every continent, and people know it. Period. They know it. They might know it more than the cross. I mean, seriously, depending where you go.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just being serious. I mean, okay. So what does that really mean, and how much is that? What kind of value does that have in our world? And again, you hear about, what these characters mean to people. Like Adam said, we've heard incredible stories that have brought the whole crew to tears that are superhero-related stories about how it impacted their life. We did an incredibly emotional interview with Phil and Theo. I don't know if you follow those guys, podcast. And, the story that Phil told about his daughter was just incredible, and it had to do with superheroes. And so that part of it to us is very amazing because, again, this stuff was absolutely the other end of the spectrum. I think that's what's kind of cool. It's not like Dad had a comic book shop and it wasn't doing real well, but it was out there. No, this was totally underground. You know what I mean? And has now surfaced. And not only has it surfaced, I mean, here we are working with Adam, who's had many other successful films, to bring it to the world in a way that's like, okay, not only are we here, we're really here. So it's just wild.
Yeah, and it almost, to be honest, it almost sounds a little bit, most people, especially in the comic collecting community, would normally want to probably take on these 300,000 comic books and go through them and stuff like that, but it almost seems to be a little bit more of, I don't want to necessarily say a burden, but a little bit of a burden.
Don't say a little bit. It's funny, you touched on something that reminds me, it's kind of humorous. People, again, you have people of all walks and be like, wow, God, hearing all those books, that's a nice problem to have. And a lot of times I've answered, I go, perhaps, but it's still a problem.
Yep.
And that's the case. So if I gave you 300,000 comics right now, where'd you put them? You have somewhere to put them?
Right.
You're right. Do you have 3 shipping containers in a warehouse that you own, ready to go? Do you have climate control? Do you have dehumidification? Do you have fire protection? Do you have security? Do you have separate security? Do you have insurance? Insuring this collection is about $25,000 a year.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of maintenance that goes into it. And was your father at all into the maintenance and insurance and stuff like that, or was
I can't answer to the insurance because remember everything was hush hush secret. The books didn't even exist. Don't forget. Oh my God. Okay, but the thing is that I can't answer to that, but I can answer to his neurosis. I can't answer to the fact that because they were in the home, that he didn't want to leave it. And that he didn't want to go on vacations because he was constantly worried about security, and that he was worried about, power outages. So he got a generator, and again, nothing wrong with that. But the reason he got the generator was so that the AC would run in the summer if the power went out for a week, so that they would keep the dehumidification.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't to make us more comfortable or safer.
Yeah,
it was to make sure the comics were.
Right, yeah, it's not to make sure the fridge stays running so the
Correct.
food stays good. Yeah, it's
No.
the comics don't get.
That was a side thing.
Right.
But I remember when he bought the generator, and I remember what his priorities were. Can it run the air conditioning while doing these other things so these will be safe? And that was 100%, So he led with the collectibles. That's why in the, again, please watch that other video. I think you'll really like it. And please let me know, please email me what you think. And Adam too. But you'll see that there's a scale in the label. Okay. Now that's representative of him being an attorney. Okay. And you'll see, if you look at that label, the way the scale is tilted. And you have our family that are on one side of the scale, and you have a couple of comic boxes on the other. So it's a metaphor for the priority and then obviously bringing into just the fact that he was an attorney, because I had to use a lot of layering, to get in this whole story as much as I could on this finite little label. And our artist, so brilliant, Eric, just blew us away with how he was able to incorporate, all this stuff based on just me giving him these ideas for images to, represent the story. So there's just, all I can say is that no matter what people think about this story, if I had to like name one thing that I would want people to walk away with, I would say too, I have to cheat. I would say humbled and authentic. Okay, because the thing is that there's nothing here that's being blown out of proportion and to make either the film or the story more interesting. We're incredibly humbled at the opportunity we've been given by so many people. We're hated on by some people for the label. We're praised on others. Well, I got news for you. When CGC and Matt Nelson, the president of CGC, gets a hold of you and says, we'd like to offer you this opportunity, what do you tell them? Thanks, no thanks. Screw you. Buzz off. No, you don't do that. Okay? You respect it. You respect that they admire the authenticity. You respect that you're not a pedigree by definition. I'm asked that all the time. Why are you not a pedigree? And the answer is it's very simple. Read the rules. Okay? Read the rules right on CGC's website. Okay? And the rules are that it has to be acquired by firsthand. Now, that can include an inheritance, so that omits me. I can still count as a pedigree, okay, inheriting it. But he had to buy this stuff firsthand. And he didn't buy all of it firsthand. He bought most of it firsthand, but not all of it. And they like to represent the entire collection. So that's why they're calling it a provenance collection and a named collection. And they've done that other times. Nicolas Cage has a named provenance collection because he's Nicolas Cage. Okay? Well, we're a provenance collection because of the story, because of the preservation, okay, and so on. So we're certainly not Nick Cage, okay? But you know what? The story's a little more interesting than just being a superstar rich person that was able to buy whatever they wanted, okay? So when they come to you and say, would you like to do a label, you make the most of that opportunity, and we did the best we could. And we incorporated a lot of things because of it. On the front, we put both the Fantast, which is the name of the collection, which is a name my father used. People yell at me, why don't you use his name? Well, I thought this was cooler. This is a name that he used, which also, by the way, literally translates into a person with extraordinary foresight and dreamer, believer, and practical person. That is the textbook dictionary Oxford definition of that word, Fantast. I thought it was cool. Maybe I'm wrong. But
I think it's absolutely amazing.
I went with it. So guess what? I own it.
Yeah,
okay. That's it.
Haters be haters. I mean, that leads into you're talking about authenticity. That's part of the film is that, people aren't understanding you correctly, right? Part is knowing, like, when you come out, when you're vocal with it, when you're not hidden with it, people aren't always going to take you the right way. It's part of, like, being, like, in our culture right now is people are going to make shit up. They're going to take it the wrong way, and it's gonna it's gonna hurt, right? It's gonna trigger, it's gonna hurt, and we get to kind of watch that process and watch the thick skin develop, because it's not an easy thing to have everyone peering into your life. And so I applaud Darren for letting us in. It's hard, man. I've been in my own films before, and I always had to think of myself as a character so that I wouldn't worry how I come off so much,
Yeah,
it is harder than I ever imagined. It is harder, and I don't say that with boohoo. I say that with just, again, authenticity and truth. It is very, very hard to expose your story, especially embarrassing and personal. Put yourself out there for the jealousy, for the hate, for the everything. You put it on stage for everybody to comment. And since I've never done anything like this before, since I'm not used to a limelight or a spotlight in any way, nor do I crave it. It is harder than I could ever imagine. And unfortunately, Adam has to brunt a lot of that from me, where I'm like, damn it, why did we do this? And and I mean it. Those are correct statements. But I do think it's important because, again, I don't want to shy away from people that may have a different opinion. All I ask is that they understand what we did first. So if you're going to hate on the label and say, well, why would you put Fantast and selling Superman on the front of the label? That's terrible. Well, understand that there was a lot of thought that went into it. And we said, okay, we're naming the collection Fantast, so we want to represent that. And then, there's going to be this documentary that if people see, then they can relate and say, oh, this is a book from that movie, from that story. So we figured that was a smart thing to do, is to put both both ways that someone could associate our story, which would be A, the film, and B, just the name of the collection, right there on the front, keep it minimal, and then on the back, really explode the story. Yes. So, again, maybe that was the most foolish thing in the world, and that's just fine. Just understand the decision.
Well, and the film affects his life, so it's part of it. I mean, you can't. There's some parts I can't say yet that you'll see in the film, but the crew in the film really have an effect on the story. There is no fourth wall. We're part of this journey, and I love films like that, because you can never be a total observer as a documentary crew. You're affecting it, so why not take it to the nth limit and be honest about how we're affecting somebody's life while we're filming them?
Yeah, definitely. And to go back to the label on the CGC case, I think, in my opinion, it was a very good decision to make, because that's kind of reassuring that the story isn't going to leave these books. So now wherever these books end up in 100 years, 150 years, it's goes back to the Fantast collection and
Sure.
your collection and your family and your story. And like I said, a lot of times when I hear stories like those, then I get even more attached to the book than I was before that.
It's funny you say that. So many enlightening moments. You were coming from the opinion that we hope everyone has. Now, that's not realistic, okay? That you were drawn in, and it would be more likely for you to possibly own a book because it's from the collection. That's wonderful, okay? But there are people that say just the opposite. They're like, oh, now that I know about this toxic family and these, blah, 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 I would never buy one of those books. And at first that kind of irked me. I'm like, God, really? You could always just re-slab it, boy. And it did get under my skin eventually. And, it's funny because one of the characters in the film, Josh, and he's become like a little brother. But the thing is that in sometimes his innocence is so precious, because he reminds me just of a different level of thinking and humility. But the point is that he said, well, Darren, do you want one of those people owning your books? It was like ding, like a light bulb went off. I'm like, oh my God, that is like totally right. If this is a way to wedge those people that I wouldn't want owning these books away from our books, wow, what a little gift. Yeah, I mean, I just thought that was so, I thought that was so profound of him to just very simply just say, well, wait a minute, why are you worried about those people? Do you even want them owning them? And the answer is no, I don't.
Right.
So, cool.
I think it's really cool, too, because there's so many times where you hear and see and look up things about comics, and it's like, why do you like this comic? And it's like, well, I think if I get it now and save it for this and slab it for this, it'll be worth this much money. But I'm always more like the story guy. Like, I love the stories, I love the characters. That's why I got into movies. That's why I got into books and things all. And this is such a great story, and having that story, and it's not just another, like, look at all these comics I have. Look how much they sold for. Look at this is really cool. Like, it's like I said before, a glorified situation, but the deeper story on the backside, like Javier was saying, is like that almost means more to me than if I had Superman #1 sitting here with me. That's so
100%.
Cool that you guys are taking that and taking that authenticity that you talked about and applying that to this movie instead of just, if people are thinking you're cashing in, like, you would have made a totally different documentary. I feel like, you know what I mean? You could have made an hour-and-a-half long commercial for these comics instead, but you told the real story, and I really.
But see, that's what we're getting blamed of too, because again, no awareness. Listen, it's super simple. This could have been about any asset. I just watched a documentary on Pez. Adam watched the same one. I think we were on the same flight when we watched it together. The guy, an extraordinary story about this guy sneaking Pez dispensers into the United States from like the plant, and oh my God, that's a story. That's not about Pez. You know what I mean? That's a story, okay? This could be about comic books. This could be about baseball cards. It could be about Pokemon cards. It could be about movie posters. Any asset, okay, of excess, just to make it more interesting, of an obsession, right? It could have been about anything. It could have been about bottle caps, for God's sake. Seriously. It could have been about stamps. Pick it. So the thing is that this has nothing to do with, I mean, of course it does, because again, we tie in the superhero and even not the superhero, just some of the old stories, like the pre-comic code stuff, the horror stuff, right? Explaining how these stories really changed throughout our history. I mean, you have stories of women's rights, ethnic rights, all sorts of things that are represented in these stories. I talk about that in the trailer. That's really amazing when we're going through these endless covers and like, wow, look at Superman with Hitler in one hand and, Mussolini in the other hand or whatever. And there's all different variations of all of it. Okay, wow, this was straight up propaganda back in the day. And then understanding how they had to stop with some of the, the women-related stuff, whether they'd either be, getting slapped or tied up, just because, again, back then in those days, that wasn't as offensive to them at the time. But understanding that, it's just really wild. So that's part of this. But this could have been about any asset. What if my dad had 500 cars?
Yeah.
I don't know. It'd be about working out 500 cars and calling up Barrett Jackson and whatever. And, okay, what are we doing here, guys? Yeah. I mean, right? It'd be about that. That'd be interesting, too. This just happens to be about comics.
Yeah. It's the same journey that's getting told in the same story.
Yeah.
Regardless of the asset that is there.
Yeah, the little part that I might say is cool about comics is that there's certain archetypes in comics and there's certain heroic traits in comics that we tend to admire, and it's nice to look at those and see what we're taking on and whether or not we're taking that on as true. Stories, I think, impact us more than cars, right? Or bottle caps. We ingest those stories. People have a deep relationship with those stories. Superman is more well known than a bottle cap because Superman is an iconic figure, and it was important to Darren. Darren wearing the Superman underoos. I say Superman when I go get a coffee. I put my name as Superman now, and just to watch someone smile. I like to see them struggle to say it like they don't want to. I'm like, no, who's this for again? Yeah, exactly. Who's this for? Superman. I'm like, you damn right.
You make them say it. You're like, yep.
They make them say it, and then some little kid looks up, and I'm like, shh, don't tell anyone.
There you go.
But no, there is something unique, I think, about these stories because and they're so big now. Hollywood is really forcing them down our throats. All these heroic stories, and I come from the place where I think Hollywood's putting a little too much. I'll say a little. I'm being nice. Focus on the powers and this fight against evil, and less about like the inner hero and maybe what the true, like we were saying, Darren's mom's a real hero in so many ways. Darren's a hero in so many. You're a hero in everyday ways, and I think the little choices we make are the heroic things, not the big. How often are you going to have the big battle against Darth Vader in your life? Probably never, and we're probably scared that we might do the wrong thing if we did come across that moment of, do I save the world or myself? But there's a lot of heroic things we can do day to day, just in the way we relate to ourselves or our family, that I think are really heroic, that just doesn't get portrayed in a lot of the stories. And so it's something me as a filmmaker I get to like play with a little bit and touch on and use that make comics unique in this collectible, right? Superman is like Darren was saying, they say the cross, the Jewish star, and Superman are the three most known symbols. I think Kevin Smith said that, Clerks.
I wouldn't doubt that. Superman probably being one of the most famous people, or not real people, but famous figures on the planet.
Yeah, I think it's great.
I'm reminding myself to get Kevin Smith in the movie. Okay, go. Sorry.
Shoot him our way too while you're at it.
All right.
I think it's a great vehicle too for this documentary does have a lot to do with mental health. And you connected feeling like you wanted to be Iron Man and feeling like you wanted to have that suit of safety, and everything up until now, like Wakanda Forever being the most recent one, and dealing with struggles and loss and cultural acceptance and things like that. I think superheroes create that, I don't know if vehicle is the best word, but vehicle for getting that out to the masses, to feel like you're not alone and you have that outlet to connect to. So I think this is I don't know if you get that with bottle caps, but
you're right.
But I think this is a great way to, as somebody who deals with mental health stuff as well, I think just finding that thing to connect to and having that be the Iron Man suit for you and this collection, and just the weird thing that you had Iron Man to connect to deal with your mental health, but
just
also
to be clear, that was.
The Iron Man, the Iron Man was the artist that did our label. Not myself.
The artist,
yeah. But to him, it was extremely powerful because he was very bullied and and so on. And he tells that, and we talk about that in the film. But you're right; it doesn't matter who it is. That represented that to him 100%.
I think it's crazy that the heroes, that make you feel like you can feel safe connecting to them can also be a collection that makes you feel mental health issues at the same time. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I know.
driving that and exploring these things is just fascinating to me as, you know, the story goes.
It is.
And again, if someone asked, you know, do I consider my father a collector? I really don't. I consider, you know, someone that collects, someone that enjoys their possessions, that shares in them, that is proud of them, maybe perhaps displays them, has reasons for them. Not someone that just buys everything, throws them in a box and says, well, you know, maybe these would be worth something. He never looked at them. He never touched them. That's why they're such incredible shape. Okay? I mean, literally, my friend that is my best friend that is on this journey with me, who, again, is in the trailer, and we brought up Brian, you know, he literally smells his comics. That's not a funny thing. I'm not telling you guys anything new. You know, that's important to him. Okay? And the thing is that, again, I'm not making fun of it right now. I'm trying to talk about, you want to talk about someone who's into it. I mean, that's the real deal. That wasn't my dad. I wasn't even close to my dad. You know what I mean? It wasn't even close to having that kind of mindset. The reason he didn't grade wasn't because he was a purist and loved raw books. It was because he was afraid. He didn't want them to leave his sight. He thought they were going to switch them on him. He thought someone was going to steal them in the parking lot from him. These are real. That's the mail guy who was going to steal them. Whoever. You know, I mean, that's not a way to live. That's just not a way to enjoy your collectibles where you're so paranoid for them and about them that you don't even enjoy them in any way, shape, or form, nor do you let your friends or family in on the journey.
Right.
Okay? I mean, I'm sorry. I don't know how many people I've run into and say, you know, I'm collecting and now my kid's into it with me. And now my son's into it with me. And this is going to be his collection one day. My father was not consciously doing it. He was not building a collection for me. That is incredibly important to relay. My father was not building a collection for the family. He wasn't. He would have handled it differently. He would have responded to us differently when he asked about it. He would have had intent. He would have had wishes. He would have had documentation. Okay, he had the capability. He was a brilliant man. You know, there's nothing wrong with having Asperger's at all. I have many friends that have it. I have many friends that children have it, but it's managed and it's realized. Okay, I wear glasses. You two obviously wear glasses. Why do you wear glasses? Because your eyesight without them is not perfect. So you utilize a crutch to get them more in tune with, you know, again, being at a level that lets you perform optimally. Well, my father did not address his condition and did nothing to try to perform optimally and or treat others optimally. And so therefore everyone suffered. There is nothing wrong with having any condition in life as long as you are aware of it, manage it, admit it. And, you know, we've run into, Adam more so than me, run into many different personalities through Comic-Cons or whatever that literally announce that they have a form of autism and or Asperger's in their first meeting. So that they make sure that they do not offend you unintentionally. Just like, listen, hey, you know, if there's something a little off, you know, socially or whatever, this is why. Oh my God, no problem. Let's go. And I got news for you. Anyone that makes fun of that, well, I don't want anything to do with that kind of person. But the point is, anyone that is any quality kind of person that looks at a person with a wheelchair and says, oh, let me open that door for you or give you a little extra assistance and recognizes the condition, fantastic. That's the way it's supposed to be. But I think the main piece of this is when you bring in the mental health, it was unadmitted, unrealized. Even when we went to him countless times and said, Dad, you really are making people feel uncomfortable with your social, you know, the way you carry yourself and the way you say things and the way you don't say things or the way you don't recognize body language or someone getting very upset. That was the hurtful part, is that he never took our word for it, that he was hurting. It was always someone else's fault, either our fault or we were taking it wrong. So that was that struggle, and we're tied into all this.
And from my understanding, like you said, it went unaddressed, but it went undiagnosed for a long time as well, right?
Literally, unofficially diagnosed to the end of his life.
Oh, wow.
Because my mother went to multiple counselors and things, and I did. But see, he made fun of that. He predatored on that. If you went to counseling, you were weak. If you went to counseling, it meant you were crazy. There's something wrong with you. Why are you going to counseling? I'm not going to counseling. I'm fine. That's what he'd say. Well, number one, you're not fine at all. And just because you don't go doesn't mean there's nothing wrong. It'd be like you not admitting that you need maybe help with your eyesight. Well, denial doesn't fix your eyesight. right? You get
Makes it
some
worse.
glasses, you correct it, and whatever. You want to be in denial all you want. I don't care, but you still can't see right, man. I mean, and again, me either. I need glasses too for distance. So the point is, what's wrong with that? Why? And he wore glasses. That was a huge part of his thing. Is he had 4 retina detachments on. Yeah, Adam's wearing glasses. Look at that.
These are blue blockers, but
That's a phony. You're one
I know it's
in.
fake. They're fake. I look like a grandma. You guys have cool glasses. I look like a grandma.
Right.
Blue
Get
blockers.
some Ray-Bans.
So it just goes back to, no, it was never officially diagnosed to him. It was always passively. So he'd go to some therapists and stuff with my mom, and everything, and it was always passively diagnosed. But he met every single, literally bullet point, okay? And so it became extremely obvious. But when it wasn't obvious, then we were faced with 2 choices. Does Dan have a slight handicap, or whatever you want to call it, okay? Because that's not a bad word, okay, in my book. And someone else may hate on me, like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. But there's some portion that he needs assistance with, just like glasses, okay, whatever. Or is it conscious and he's just a jerk? Because the net result of either one is he's making people feel very, very bad. Mm-hmm. So are you doing it intentionally, or can you not help it? And we always wanted to believe that he couldn't help it, because that's a lot less painful, isn't it, than believing that your father is literally hurting your mother and your brother, who can't even defend himself properly, by the way, and then, of course, me, and his other family members, and his business partners, and. There was always a common denominator of what wedged the relationships that he was in, and it was always him. So, okay, do we feel sorry for you because you have this, slight problem that maybe you need to just be more aware of? Or are you just not going to admit it ever? And okay, fine, I guess it's all conscious and you're just a jerk. But his angle was everyone else was crazy but him, and that they were all overreacting, and that he wasn't responsible for the loss of any of these relationships. So I just don't know what you do with that. So that's where we were at.
I want to say we interviewed recently a phenomenal lady named Temple Grandin, who's PhD over at Colorado State and has had movies made about her. And she's such an advocate of training, meaning like learning. Yes, she's more talking autism in general, and she really helped also say Asperger's, putting it within the autism spectrum it's not the greatest thing, because they're very different, but there's some similarities, but it's also very, very different. But she's such an advocate for training, just learning. You really got to teach people manners, teach everyone, the whole society, to be honest. She loves Superman. Darren ended up giving her, we gave her a book. You'll see that in the film too. But I really love that about her. She's just like, no, we need to be aware of it and train, and so it might take longer to learn people's, their faces and that they're expressing emotion, but she's like, but I trained myself to learn that, and I had help, and it was good that I knew that, that we knew that I needed help with that. And like we met a guy at Comic-Con that was dressed as Superman. He's like, I just found out, I had Asperger's 2 years ago, and he's like, now I tell people, like Darren was saying, and it's really helped my relationship. His girlfriend was dressed as Wonder Woman, and it helped people understand if you react a certain way, like don't take it personally. That kind of stuff. So, hopefully this is Autism Awareness Month, and next month is Mental Health Awareness Month too. So we're in a big time to, talk about these things. I love that Darren is open to talk about it in the film, and that his whole family's been open just to talk about it, to normalize these things. It's really important.
Yeah, definitely, and it really speaks on you guys, as a family. We were talking when all these things get thrown into everything, whether it's the hardships that you guys went through, and when you were currently going through it, and even having to deal with it now. You had mentioned, you are still Darren at the end of the day, and none of this is really changing you, and I feel like I can tell that just from this conversation that we've had, that you're very humble, and it seems even from the documentary or the trailer and everything that Adam has put together, it seems like at least that's the way that I'm taking it, is that you guys are very humbled, and this doesn't seem like it's gonna be, I'm sure it is life-changing. It is gonna be life-changing, but not in a way of, if most people were handed a few $1 million, I'm sure they'd go and buy a car and a mansion and all this other stuff, and it would change them, and almost probably realistically bring the demons out, of some people. And it seems like you guys are very, on top of yourselves and very humbled. And like I said, you know, bringing this to the screen and being public with the whole story is hard, you know, and I think it's what's making it a really great story, and that's what I keep, like I said, I keep finding myself more and more attached to you guys and your story than any of it.
Well, thank you so much, and you're hitting it on the head. I mean, it hasn't changed me one bit. Again, like I say, and I don't say it in a way to boost myself, but I think it is important for people to know that again, I've been able to provide myself the lifestyle that I've wanted well outside of these comics, and that it isn't changing that. Will we capitalize on the financial value? Of course we will. Will we share it with a lot of people? Of course we will. Will we be fair and extra fair on a lot of the sales? Yes, we will. Okay. Will we maximize our opportunity and sell with places like Heritage? Not all of it, but a lot of it. I get a lot of hate on that. Like, oh, you're probably going to give it all to Heritage. Heritage has been incredible to me. Now, you might say, well, of course they have. But the answer is, it's just good business and it's just good customer service. Okay? And the answer is, anybody is free. You don't need to be, Heritage sells books for $20. I hope everyone realizes that. Okay, they don't just sell, $1,000 books and up or anything like that. No, they sell all kinds, anything you want to sell. I could literally drop off this entire collection to them and sell it. Now, that does not mean that we're not selling it through multiple dealers. I'm selling through multiple dealers. Okay, Harley Yee being one of them, if you know that name. Okay, he's a local Detroit guy. He's always been honest. I knew him as a kid. I didn't know him, but I knew of him as a kid. And so people like that. He has an incredible reach. He goes to God, he's got to go to 30, 40 shows a year. The guy's insane. He's always on the road. Okay, and so there's incredible reach with him. And then we're dealing with very, very, very small dealers that I'm giving a big break to, and I enjoy that process. Okay, we go to local, tiny little shows here. I don't ever set up myself. I let them shut up. I let them get the notoriety, and we work on consignment. So again, all different avenues of people benefiting. But I don't think there's anything wrong with. Again, capitalizing on the opportunity, okay, that fell in our lap, whether we want it or not. It would be foolish to not be aware and cognizant of the value and trying to make sure that we're not necessarily getting the last penny for everything, but just not trying to, like you said earlier, not get taken.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a lot of people that would come in here and be like, oh, I'll give you X for the lot. Well, that would be rash and foolish. And luckily, we are not in a position where we need to be desperate on any front. So that's how I'll just qualify that is. But again, yes, profit will be made. Yes, that's really, really nice. But it's not going to, again, it's like you said, not going to change what cars I drive or whatever else. Things will be invested. There's generational situations to think about with what I call my children, stepchildren, and many other things. So, I just challenge anyone to what they would do differently,
Yeah.
You want to tell me to give it all away? Okay, we're giving away a lot, but I did that before too. So,
right.
Just amplifying my existing character, if that means anything.
To that point too, you said you're going through like charities. You're giving to charities. You're giving stuff to smaller people. Being able to give 10% of $100 is not as good as being able to give 10% of $1 million. So. You capitalizing on everything is just giving you more to give to people in need and, those charities and things as well. So I don't know why you wouldn't in the first place,
Right. I just, everyone wants to say, and I'm not just feeding into what people think, but it is interesting until you think about if it happening to you.
Right.
It's very easy to judge what I'm doing. But, okay, now just all of a sudden, like I say, deal with your father's passing on your own. Remember, I dealt with it all. Put him in hospice, made the decision, all these things. So there's an emotional impact, of course. Whether I had differences with him or not, I still loved him. I mean, there are times I miss him. There are times I, want to call him and tell him something. But at the end of the day, no, he really was a pain point for me for most of my life. And that's just a fact. I'm not boo-hooing about it, okay? I mean, there's people that have different levels of abuse in their life, of parenting or whatever else, and I'm not trying to compare mine to anyone else's. I'm just saying what it is. I'm not trying to say mine's more or less than someone else's. I'm just saying it did occur. did impact me. It did impact the way that I feel. It did impact the way I judge myself in life. It was hurtful, period. I watched my mom go through a lot, period. And then to come out later and have, people misunderstand and say things about your own mother, that's a little hard.
Yes.
You want to say something about me, that's one thing. You want to start judging my mom, like Adam said. I mean, she's the opposite.
Yeah, and I mean, I even, it's not my personal story, but it's the movie, right? And I got a little riled up on the YouTube, and I found myself, seeing people on YouTube, and the comments were so off that I'm like, oh, I got to respond to everyone and tell them how it is. And then I paused about 5 minutes into that, and I was like, it's fucking midnight, man. Like, go to bed, Adam. Right. You're not going to change the world tonight. Yeah. Just go to sleep. And, I recognize I have certain skills and I meditate, so like maybe I can turn that off, and it's also not my mother and it wasn't my life, right? But that's not easy to deal with. I don't know DJ Jungle if if your mental health is struggling going to sleep or anything like that, but that can be hard if people are talking smack. It's not the easiest thing to just go, I'm fine. We're not really taught that well, I don't think, in America, to just have self-worth regardless of what social media is saying. So it's a tough
especially
thing.
Being males in the Midwest. Like, you're from Detroit, where I'm from Wisconsin, he's from Indiana. It's here especially is still really tough to just talk about your feelings in general, especially as a male. So just putting this out there and being like, hey, we're doing this, we're here, you can come to us and you can come to this community, and we see you for, who you are, and we're okay with that. But, just be upfront with yourself, be upfront with us, and let's all work together to make everybody happy. And, the mental health side is just speaking volumes to me. So, and I'm speaking with my hands a lot that aren't even on the camera.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate you guys being here and not just putting out just another documentary, just like every other documentary that you could have put out. I guess
No.
one thing I do want to ask, is there anything else that you want to say before we go, or where can we find more information? You said sellingsuperman.com and the Instagram. Is there anywhere else you guys want to direct people?
I just want to tell people, go to the website, sellingsuperman.com, because A, you can see the trailer, but B, you can sign up for the email list, and we're going to do stuff like scholarships / giveaways. We want to help any young dealers get going with, and I say we, meaning like Darren and his collection, right? But we as a group, this film is part of it all. So drop your email in, become part of the community, and we're going to keep the conversation going. We look at it just like the way you're talking, where it should be a helpful thing. Hopefully the film and Darren putting his ass on the line like this will inspire some people and help some people out.
And please, and again, anywhere Harley Yee is, you can literally walk up to him or his staff and say, show me the Fantastic books. And they usually have them segmented, and, I bet you they're going to be in really nice shape. The stuff that he's got. So the thing is that enjoy and know that he's selling them on our behalf. He's very fair. But there's other dealers as well, like Hatchback Comics, okay, and Big Daddies out of Cleveland. And again, these are smaller time, but that's what I'm doing it for. That's why I'm doing it. To spread it around and give people the opportunity. But I guess one thing I'll just close is, man, that it's funny how money is what a lot of times influences either people's jealousy or opinions, or gives them a let's just say gives them an opinion. And I can just speak to the fact that it's not about the money, and if it's about the money for people, then they really are probably watching the wrong documentary or just don't want to understand us. This isn't a money grab situation. And again, yes, there's money in it. Okay, there's money in any comic dealer. I find it ironic that I'll get criticized by people about how I'm handling the sales of my comics from people that make their living selling comics. It's like, well, if you do that, you're obviously profiting, and you're charging more than you're paying for it. So That's interesting, isn't it? Okay, I have a cost basis of 0 on all of this. Yes, I understand that. So does that mean they should all be sold for $1? I mean, again, it's just silly, okay?
Yeah.
People are silly. And so the thing is that money changes people's opinions on things, and it shouldn't. It's just the way Adam said, in America especially, maybe in other parts of the world, but, we're so ingrained in materialism and, status and all that, and this isn't what this is about at all, and that's not who we are. So, again, we're going to respect and recognize the worth and value of the assets. That's just common sense, people.
Yep.
So, okay. So if you want a fair deal on a great book, we'd love to sell you one. Please see, again, our dealers. We don't take as many, it's very hard for us to do direct requests. So like my Instagram is fantast_comics is the one I manage. And then there's Selling Superman Film. But the fact is, it's very difficult for me to fulfill requests directly with DMs and things because, again, they're not in order. It's not about me, not wanting to deal with a little guy or something like that. It literally is, if you ask me where Fantastic Four 129 is, I have it, and I don't know where. I can't go to a box and say, here it is, okay? And here's the 10 copies of it, or whatever. I don't. Bigger. Well, but it's not just that. They're just all over. He didn't put them in order. He didn't put them in order. That is such an amazing thing, and it's something we're dealing with constantly. So, right now we're still sifting through things, and we're deciding what to grade and not, because that's like one of the biggest decisions. Great, not great. I mean, I can't even tell you how much has been spent on grading. But it's insanely significant. Well into the 6 figures. And so the thing is that it's like, that's daunting. You can't grade everything, nor should you. And that's one of the first things that we're still dealing with, going through, and then the things that aren't, we sift out to local dealers or decide what we're keeping. Because yes, the answer is I do collect comics. I do have ones that I will not part with. I do have ones I find very valuable. I do buy comics. I just bought 2 great comics at the last Heritage Auction. Adam thinks I'm crazy. But hey, that's part of the story. It's part of the story.
Correct.
Part of the story.
I do. Right. Everyone's got their own things, I don't get to decide who's crazy, right? That's the good. We give meaning to who we are. So if you like comics, that's great, And if you want to buy comics, that's great. If I watch Champions League soccer, which I will in a moment, that's great, Yeah. Why not?
I think that's something
I was going to say that actually answered one of my last questions, was if there was any bit of this that I'm sure that you're probably keeping, or if there was a book in there that maybe you wanted as a child and obviously didn't know it was there and found it and you're like, this one's mine.
Yeah, I'll speak to that for a second. Because that's another thing that I'll get is like, oh, he never liked comics and now he's super into it. Well, I'm into business. All right, I have businesses, and I recognize that this is a massive business, okay? And that's what this is. It's an opportunity, it's a business, and it's also just an overall responsibility, right? To my father, even literally, to respect in whatever way I can what he did, and intentionally or intentionally, for 50 years. Okay, so that's just that. But I did not collect comics as a kid. I collected sports cards briefly, but the problem with comics was that I resented them. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when it's forced on you in a way that was not the right message, okay, comics were not like, oh my God, look at this new character, or oh my God, look at this new cover, or oh my God, can you believe they did a crossover with these 2 characters? That wasn't how I was brought up with comics. Mm-hmm. My brought up with comics was, I have a bunch of stuff in this brown paper bag that I went to the store. Don't look at it. Don't touch it. You can't handle it, and we're going to put that away. Well, that was my how I grew up with comics. Did I love superheroes? Of course. Did I love the movies? Of course. Did I read some comics here and there? I did, but it was not something I collected or got into because it was almost repelled because of how it was, in our house. That was the message, okay, that I was given with comics, and just by osmosis, right? Not even directly. So now that I get to see how some of these cool covers are and some of these cool stories, and yes, being a Superman maximalist myself, yes, the answer is I'm enjoying the process of being able to say, nope, that's not going anywhere. That's sweet. Let's get more of those, or that story or whatever. Like I'm reading an awesome story line in Superman right now in a series that I love. Okay, he visits his son, and all his powers get tripled, and he's just so untouchable. And it's just like, this is the ultimate for a Superman fan. Like, he just, So the thing is that I do enjoy that, but they're not. The books aren't worth anything. You know what I mean? They're just the readers. So I respect the business side of it. I respect the investment side of it. I do love some of the art and some of the storylines and the covers. So absolutely, the answer is that I am still holding on to and or purchasing certain books of good opportunity and significant books. Significant books. So not just here and there. We bought some real nice books. But it's not buying. It's trading at the end, right? Because if you sell 100 books, 200 books, and you buy 2 that are like focused in on what you want, you know what I mean? That's a little different than just, haphazardly buying stuff out of nowhere. I'm not spending money that's not coming from the collection. See?
Right. That's
It's just
something
recycled.
That's something we like to talk about on our podcast too, because when we started this, we started feeling like we had to be on top of everything all the time. And we just started buying comic books just to be like, oh, this one's coming out. And then we sat down, we're like, this is the stories that I like. This is what I'm going to do. Everything else I can kind of look online. And we talk about things like whatnot and ways to collect, because obviously we have little collections and do what we do. But it's important to find that medium where you're not losing your house buying a comic book or going on eBay and buying this thing that you think is great and you get it and it's fake. Just go out, collect, but be careful, pay attention to what's going on. And I think you have the ultimate story of that,
Yeah. No, and listen, humbled, and if you want to use the word fortunate, but let's qualify it and say fortunate in comics. I would not trade these comics for the experience I had with my father growing up, period. Okay? Period. I would have much rather had memories, decades and decades of memories with him, feeling valued, feeling appreciated, feeling his pride, which I felt none of. Right. And I would have absolutely, again, I made my own way in this world, okay? It doesn't mean that I'm sitting there drinking cocktails with Jeff Bezos, okay? But I made a comfortable way in this world that I'm very satisfied with way before this. And the answer is that I would never have traded this inheritance of comics. And to also speak, he didn't have any other real things liquid. He owned a house, that was it. He didn't have tremendous means. 99.9% of his net worth was in these collectibles when he died. 99%. Literally. He did not have. He was on Social Security and fine, but he was not a man of means. He focused in on this. So the answer is that no, I would absolutely trade it in a heartbeat. And even right now, knowing what it's worth, take it on and have that that quality time with him. So I mean that. There's no way that anyone could really believe me or prove it, but I do mean it. And that's all I can say. It's not about the money that way. It really is about the value of that time and that feeling. Anyway, but yeah, we do collect certain things and have fun with it, and that's what it's for, right? That's what it's for. Right. And it's cool when you find that book and you're like, oh, I've been looking for that. Like a Startling Comics 49 I got in real high grade recently. I always want the Bender cover, and again, and there was the opportunity was there, I bought it. It was great. And stuff like that. So
Darren likes
still get that rush.
Darren likes comic books. I can just tell you. He's definitely grown to, because like after the Batman sold at auction at Heritage, later that day, they went to a comic book store. You know what? I swear to God,
in Dallas.
In Dallas, him and Brian, they went to a comic book store, and I'm like jaw dropped. I'm like, oh my gosh, they just really like, they like the genre, they like it. You get in. I starting to like it more and more as I go too. And having my favorite. I'm a Green Lantern dude.
Yeah,
and all that stuff. So yeah, it's hard not to, right? Once you get exposed to it,
Just wrapping up, I don't think we even have to ask anymore, but Marvel or DC?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Too general. Yeah. Really, I would say if you have to overall, more characters in Marvel for me than DC. But I mean, I would never trade Superman.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
So that's a
you'd have to ask me if it's Star Wars versus Lord of the Rings. That would be more the question.
Which one?
I was up until 5 a.m. playing Star Wars. So. Whoops.
I go with Star Wars because of the presence of the Force and how that relates to like Yoda and yogic thought and quantum physics. I think it primed me more for life. Lord of the Rings is quite a cool, when it comes to this film, quite a cool metaphor because, you know, Gollum takes his ring and goes into a cave where he can't really even use it, and I find that to be very similar to Dale. Yeah. He takes his collection into a cave where he can't even use it. So that's my answer.
Wow, there we go.
I created my own question.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. I feel like we always get so stuck on Marvel and DC, and, you know, we do other things outside of this. So that's really cool to hear a different view.
Well, to read in on that a little bit more, one of the things that Marvel gets, or DC gets criticized for a little bit is being too, like, you know, perfect and everything like that. But see, I don't mind that in my superheroes, right? I mean, again, like, you know, like people are against, let's say, Superman or something like that. Oh, he's too perfect, too good old boy. It's like, no. That's kind of what I like, is that larger than life, like, you know, completely, you know, idling, you know, character. So again, I respect the writing and you know, bringing a Spider-Man or, you know, some of these other characters to real, you know, Tony Stark, a drinking problem or whatever, you know, bring it to real world problems that human beings have. I respect that very much. But you know what? When you want to escape and just be like dazzled and wow, I want to feel good and I want to feel comfortable that the good guys are going to win. And, you know, that's what made Star Wars so powerful, right? There was such a clear line of good and evil. Mm-hmm. You know, like you knew which was good and evil. You know, it was very, very evident. And there's been studies about that I've come across, that even that we just identify with that more. It's a comforting feeling to just know where it stands. There's an allure to having a mystery to it as well. But, you know, as far as overall, just you know, he's the good guy. You know what I mean? There's a comfort to that, and I like that. I have to admit, I like that.
I find myself rooting for the good guy pretty often, but every once in a while there's a villain that I'm like, here we go.
I love Lex Luthor. I think he's hysterical. I mean, who can't watch Superman 2 and not crack up every time? Yeah. I mean, but the thing is that, you know, but hey, anyway.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us on our podcast.
Thank you.
I'm really happy that we got that side of the story going into it, because I think knowing that I said it 4 or 5 times, but knowing that it's not just another documentary makes it so much easier to connect to, and I really respect that. So thank you very much, you guys.
Oh, thank you for saying that. We appreciate it.
Is there any possible dates for the release of the documentary? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, just think mid 24.
Okay.
You know, mid 24 or early 24. You know, if it's a festival, like the first time you might be able to see it. But
Okay.
a lot of that just depends how fast we get it done and what festival we go to. But we have some really top people in the industry interested in this film already. So it's a good thing.
Super awesome.
Yeah.
I think that about wraps up. This is going to be episode 27 of Lights Comics Action. Thank you guys once again for coming through here. And Darren, thank you for getting extremely personal with it and letting us know all sides of the documentary and the story.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, guys.
That conversation with Adam and Darren got heavy at times, and I almost found myself just wanting to sit and listen more than host a podcast. It blew me away. I think I said it at the beginning of the podcast in the intro, but again, like just hearing, you know, how heavy it got, especially when he was a kid, and the effects that this collection had on his family and the choices that his dad made, you know, to save the collection, and not even a thought or a care in the world as to how far, you know, those effects could have on other people in his life. You know, he talked about even his business partners outside of his family were being affected by this. So this documentary is going to have a really great story, and it's going to be heavy. It's more than just a comic book story. You know what I mean? It's so much more than that.
I found myself multiple times in the conversation lost for words to a point where I almost didn't even feel the right to comment, or have an opinion or have a comment. But I'm very glad that we got to have this conversation and actually, talk to them about it and even clear some things up from what the newscast kind of made it seem like and what other sources have made it seem like.
I love Darren's attitude around the whole thing and how real he's being as well. Like, I think he used the word authenticity and authentic, and that's exactly what he was with us. You know what I mean? There was that time, I think in the podcast you had said, I don't want to call it a burden. He's like, call it exactly what it is. And he's just very real and forthcoming about, whether it be struggles, successes, feelings, emotions, everything in the story. And that was super dope. Well, I just want to say thank you again to both these dudes. Be sure to check out sellingsuperman.com. Link in the description below. They also have Instagrams and everything else going along with it. But you can find all that stuff and join the mailing list just like they said at Saving Silverman. Sellingsuperman.com. Thanks again to these dudes. Be sure to check our description for things like free money on w.gg using code Collective Comics at checkout to get your jitterless energy. And use our link to sign up for Whatnot to get $10 towards your first purchase. Until next time, this has been
Collective Comics.
I try to say it at the same time.